What's going on, guys? Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Garrison Roy, and today we're going to have an awesome full-length interview. But if you're new to the podcast, we do have several different segments. We have rants where I go on to discuss hot topics, or maybe even just, call out some of the BS in the industry. Then we also have mental minutes, those quick mental game hacks to elevate your performance, and deep dive educational explorations to just get a little bit more in depth on things to help you best get in the zone either as a player or coach. But without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get right into this one with Sam Astern. He's a ASM Sports Group agency. What would your official title be? Like a recruiting coordinator in a sense, but for the athletes?
Yeah. I'm a athlete development specialist. That's my official title. Kind of went through the whole recruiting process myself on the baseball side of things. Played since I was about 4 years old. It was always a dream to play college baseball, and I didn't really know how to go about that dream. Didn't really know where I should start, where I should reach out to, how to get in talks with coaches. So fortunately enough, I ended up going to Carson Newman University. It's a small Division II in Tennessee. They play in the SAC conference, which is South Atlantic Conference.
Oh
A
yeah.
lot of good competition in there, a lot of good schools, and yeah, so played there 4 years. Great career, great memories, and after that, I had to find a job in the real world, and fortunately enough, was allowed to stay in the sports world. Which now I'm kind of helping athletes like myself that went through that recruiting process, didn't really know where to start, and yeah, so I try to make that process go a lot more smoother and really trying to get these kids directly in talks with these coaches.
No, I love it. And you had a great experience, Carson Newman. It looks like you were there for all 4 years. Unfortunately, some guys may not have that best fit straight out of the gate, right? And they might hop around to maybe one or two other schools. So,
Yeah,
how do you guys at ASM help find that best fit for those guys to make sure that, hey, they have the best experience while they're out there, but also maybe not try to overshoot, right? That they're like saying, hey, like I'm a Division II caliber player. I could potentially play better and make it to a D1, but I'm not about to go reach out to the Power Five, Wake Forest or Duke or whatever name team that you can put out there,
yeah,
right? The
yeah,
how do you have those conversations to find that best fit and get them to be on the track of where they want to be?
yeah. No, that's great, great point. So yeah, I finding that perfect fit. That's a really key part in the recruiting process. A lot of kids nowadays, it's kind of D1 or bust,
Hmm.
and you go there, you might sit the bench for 4 years, which nobody wants. So
True.
we really try to find that perfect fit. We'll take it, obviously, skill. That's going to be like the first kind of thing we take into account. Grades, and then kind of where maybe the family's budget is for school, because it could be very expensive. Maybe they don't have the highest budget. We need to be focused on maybe a JUCO or lower level school just to get them like a larger scholarship. And then obviously we'll take into location, maybe where the athlete doesn't want to stay out of the cold, wants to maybe be in the warm, maybe they don't mind, West Coast, East Coast. So, we really take all those factors into account. And, then accordingly, our placement team will come up with a game plan, sort of say, on what schools we should be targeting. We're going to, obviously, you have the dream list, A list of dream schools you want to be in. And then you got the B list, the more realistic schools, and kind of take those two lists into account and, try and get these athletes as many opportunities as we can.
No, absolutely. I love that. And obviously, you're trying to find, you're really more just finding out what schools that don't fit them first.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, like
Yeah.
like you said, you want to play in the cold? No? Okay, cool. So you're probably going to want to be in the South, right?
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
vice versa. Hey, you want to be close to home. Or, hey, are academics important to you? Right. And, you know, sad to say, but some of the, even D1s or D2s out there may not have as great of an academic, background. So that's why a lot of those guys will end up going D3, not because of the level of play, but just more of kind of what they're holding into higher priorities, if you will, what they're looking for in a school, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and it's kind of funny now because there's a lot of recruiting guys at coaches that I've talked to. They're looking for guys because of the whole NIL deals and being able to transfer to schools pretty easily. They actually, some of those big Power Fives want guys who have playing experience at the D3 or D2 level. And this one in particular, he was at Duke at the time. He's not there now, but he said Division 3 starting like middle infielders. He's like, I would rather go pick some guys from that are already seen some college, live pitching and, had a full season underneath their belt and then bring him over versus a kid straight out of high school that may or may not have the same, type of experience or base college level pitching, right? So it's
Absolutely.
really interesting how this whole dynamic is changing in the recruiting side. Um, but how do you guys communicate that to an athlete that's like, hey, like it's not just hey, you're here for 4 years and then you're done, right? Like
Yeah,
potentially
yeah,
move up, or hey, someone else could potentially come in and take your spot too, which is also kind of nerve-wracking, but
yeah,
it's a highly competitive sport in general, but now it's like, hey, you're competing against everyone else around you in all levels now.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. We really try transfer portal nowadays. It's like you said, it's changed the whole dynamic of college sports, and it's starting to be more like a business. Unfortunately, I think it's unfortunate. For some of these kids, it's a really good thing. But some of these maybe under the radar athletes are kind of getting overlooked. It sort of say from all these big time names, the transfer portal, all of that, because the coach, like you said, the coach, maybe he's an athlete, Division 3, but he's had that experience in the college athletic world, because the difference between that high school baseball and college baseball, no matter what level you're playing at, it's a completely different game. Just the speed of the game, the talent, the skill of the players, it's completely different. So we really try to really tell these kids that it's more of a stepping stone nowadays. Where you start is not where you're gonna end, and that's just how it is nowadays. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, maybe probably longer actually. Now, 10 years ago, you would go to that. You'd go to that first school and be like, you're not leaving.
Yeah, you're
If you
locked
were
in.
trying to leave, yeah, if you
They'll
were
try to
trying to leave
develop
it,
you up from freshman all the way to senior year. And some schools are still like that, right?
yeah,
They're on.
yeah,
And a lot of them would prefer to have that, especially I think in maybe starting pitcher roles or things like that, where they're more in control of their workload and they can see them being vetted to maybe like their junior, senior year to be that Friday or Saturday guy, right? But
yeah,
for like position players, kind of what I was referring to before, like you got to get ABs, right? If you go a
yeah,
whole year without seeing some live pitching, it's going to be tough for you to bounce back, right? Which is why
yeah,
summer ball can be um, good for some of those guys, but ideally they want to see you go and compete, right? And
yeah,
I've said this once before. Is like, hey, for for me, if I was giving advice to a guy, I'd be like, hey, go to a winning program, and also go to a program that you're going to play,
yeah,
right? Maybe
yeah,
not right out of the gate. Maybe you do have some competition there, right? But you have some opportunities, and you're not just going to get redshirted right out of the gate, right?
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Like you said, it's all about getting that playing time, getting that in-game kind of reps. Because, like I was saying, just the speed of the game, it completely changes. I remember walking in there freshman year, kind of thinking I was the man, and I got humbled quick, very
Oh yeah.
quick. Even at practice, I was getting in the red in practice. I was like going from there to there to there to there, and I'm not used to this kind of speed that things are going at. I was more in high school. I was more, your left, right, ready, field your ground ball, kind of take a couple seconds, read regroup everything, and then there comes another. But maybe it's just my college. I'm not really sure, but it was bang, 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 and
Well, that's how Griffin runs his program, though, right? Like that's
yeah,
very
yeah,
tailored. Like, hey, everybody, we're making as efficient of time as possible, and I love it. I love playing against Carson Newman as a player and a coach because I knew it was going to be a high speed game, and they were going to put some pressure on you.
yeah,
We're going to be really good, and you weren't going to have very many pass ball instances, or if there were, you're
yeah.
going to be seeing a catcher flying right back to home plate real fast.
Yeah, exactly. We don't even throw the ball around. That's how quick we
No.
move.
And it's they psychologically that gets to a lot of guys when they're so used to a slower paced game, and they're just like, oh,
Yeah,
hey, here it is, here it is, here it is.
yeah,
It speeds the game up on them, but if you're used to practicing that way and playing that way, it can slow a lot of things down for you, right? And we hear about this a lot, especially for guys that I talk to that go and play professionally. They're like, oh, the speed of the game is just way faster. You don't have much time in between. And now with pitch clocks and things like that,
yeah,
it can get really, really fast on you. So I think the mental side of knowing how to kind of recenter yourself and get back into your zone, right? Like that's going to help
absolutely.
you get to be able to succeed in the best situations, whatever situation you see yourself in. You got to be locked in the entire time and not just kind of go through the motions, right? Constantly being challenged. Um, it's all part of the game, right? For
Yeah.
you, obviously, you kind of alluded a little bit to your experience of like freshman year versus high school. But what was the rest of that time at Carson Newman like for you? Were you kind of one of those guys that had to continually work and try to, put in the effort to get in, or were you kind of like, hey, like maybe I get to my junior senior year and then I get an opportunity? What was that like for you?
So there at Carson Newman, it's all work.
Oh, yeah.
From the day you get to campus to the last weeks of your senior year, it's coming down, hitting in between class, getting to practice early for early work, and then you have your practice, and then maybe you didn't hit great that day. Coach Griff's taking you in the cage, and you got more hitting after practice. So it was work ethic. That's all I can really say about my career. Unfortunately, I didn't play the most in my whole career. I got more opportunities down in my senior year, but my freshman, sophomore, junior year, it was really limited my opportunities, and you just got to make the best of what you got. And I would show up, get my work in every day. I wouldn't. Maybe freshman year, I did let it get to me a little bit, but luckily I had a good coach and Coach Griffin, and he steered me right back in the right direction and got right back to working. So that's kind of how that went. And but I still, I wouldn't change anything, any decision I made, because Coach Griff, he doesn't just develop you as a baseball player. He really develops you on the life side of things. Trying to make you into a better man. Just for down
That
the
blue
road.
collar work ethic, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's what he lives by, and that's what he always go by.
No, I love it. And I think that's the biggest thing that, out of all the college athletes, there's only a small percentage that's going to go on and play professionally. Um, and really just being able to instill those attributes of work ethic, discipline, right? Grit, especially
Yeah,
for you, like I definitely commend you. Like, hey, I stuck this out for 4 years. Some guys, if they don't see that playing time that first year, they're like, hey, I'm bouncing, or hey, they may even hang up the cleats, right? But you are
yeah.
like consistently day in, day out, like, hey, we're gonna come here, we're gonna do this, we're gonna put in the
Oh,
work,
I thought about it though.
right? Oh
I'll tell
yeah,
you that.
it comes up in everyone's mind, right? Um, I mean, again, you said you didn't want to change anything. Me personally, I wouldn't have changed my experience either, but with these new rules that came in, I've been like, man, I may have pulled the trigger and bounced around a little bit more than what
Yeah,
I did,
yeah,
you know.
yeah, yeah. No,
So
absolutely.
it's funny to kind of still also be advocating for these guys, but you're also like, hey, like where you go is going to basically make or break your career in a way, right? Why I'm also
Yeah,
a big advocate for junior colleges for some guys too, right? And I'm sure you guys probably help guys get settled in for those. But again, same thing. It's hey, you're getting playing time. Maybe it's
yeah,
just you getting a couple more years under your belt, prove yourself, and then you can go to a bigger, major D1 or possibly a Power Five, right? Um, but like we said, that recruiting landscape is changing so much now. It's pretty wild to
yeah.
kind of see all of that coming together.
It's
Um,
yeah,
oh, for a guy who's just, let's say it's just that high school senior, maybe he has a couple offers, but he's not sure if they're like good fits. What would
mhm.
some of your advice be to him if he's just like, hey, I have two offers, but not 100% sold on it. Maybe he's like, hey, I'm going to see if there's a D1 offer. What is your advice to him, and how would your guys's best fit team work to help him get to a spot? So like he's a 2025, right? Getting ready to go into senior year. Um, what would that look like for him?
Okay, so 2025, we need to get going very
Yeah.
fast.
A little
Um,
behind schedule, right?
yeah, exactly. You just don't want to be in that position where maybe you are good enough to go to that school, but that coach doesn't have any scholarship money left to give you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would probably advise him, probably just look into the JUCO route.
Yeah.
You don't want to go to this 4-year school and it not be a good fit. That's not going to only affect you on the field. That also might affect you in the classroom, and you don't want to let that happen because at the end of the day, baseball is not going to last forever, unfortunately. So that degree, that's going to be something nobody can take away from you. So, I would, because, when you go to that JUCO, it really, those first 2 years of school, it really doesn't matter where you are academic wise.
Sure.
So, I would probably advise them to go to the JUCO route, maybe find one kind of close to home that he might be interested in, develop for those 2 more years. And, if you perform those 2 years, you're going to have no problem finding a school you want to go to. Because just like I think we were taught at the beginning, a junior college kid that performed well, a high school kid that's just performed well, but just it's that coach is going to have that junior college kid so much higher.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
because you have the quality of the players that they're playing against. Like you have a guy who absolutely rocks it in high school, but the teams he plays against are, like B level or like double A, triple A, travel ball teams.
yeah,
And like
yeah,
they're never playing
exactly.
like those major league teams or, really, really high level competition. And that kind of can also vary from region of where they're from, like the Midwest versus Florida. Two
Yeah,
totally spots of competition at the high school level and the college level too. Um, but even for those guys, and I played with a few of these where they were really advanced academically, and they could only go to JUCO for 1 year, and then they needed to go right into a 4-year school because they would have already gotten their associates, right? So
right.
to your point, right, like that the academic side does matter. But that's something to kind of keep in mind too. Like if you're getting those AP classes and everything, like you may not have 2 years in JUCO. You may only have one, or
Right.
maybe one in a semester, and then you gotta bounce, or
Yeah.
otherwise you're kind of just taking a bunch of uh, not I wouldn't say remedial classes, but they're like filler classes and the fun classes
Yeah.
that just
Yeah.
keep you eligible, right? And you don't want to
Yeah.
waste your time too much, or your finances and money for that point,
Yeah. Yeah.
honestly,
Exactly.
right? So, but it's all about getting that opportunity, getting them in, getting their foot in the door, right? But I think the biggest thing is, the 2025 guy, like you mentioned, probably a little behind schedule. Then a perfect world, though, right? I think they just changed the recruiting role where they can reach out to guys August 1st going into their, correct me if I'm
Yeah.
wrong, going into their junior year.
Yeah, it's June 1st of that going into your junior year
Yeah.
is when was when they can start talking to you. I have a buddy. He's coaches at Dirtbags out in North Carolina. I'm
Oh
pretty sure
yeah.
they're based. He actually lives in Charlotte too. Funny enough.
Love that.
Yeah, and he was telling me he coaches like they have the national American team,
Hmm.
and he coaches the American team, and he was telling me his athletes on June 1st, 12 a.m. His athletes were having 8, 10, 12 school, like they were on the phone all night with these coaches, and I thought that's pretty cool how that kind of works now. You know, because you always had the 14, 13-year-olds verbally committing,
Hmm.
and it's like, dude, where's this going to go in 4 years? Like,
Yeah, you never know. They could not even project to, or they're projected to increase and throw harder and all this stuff, but
yeah,
they could totally plateau and be those guys who
yeah,
hit the, spark and hit that growth spurt early and then
yeah,
they don't develop anymore. Or they get happy because they're already committed, right? So they don't have as much work
mhm,
ethic. They're like, oh, I got it
yeah,
made. And they end up falling behind, right? So
yeah,
I actually love that rule change because it's going to keep it a lot more competitive for those guys from that freshman sophomore year level to let them continue to keep training. Obviously, I'm sure they'll be like they'll go to camps. They'll go put their name
yeah,
out in front of the college coach because if they go to their campus, they can talk to them, right? But
yeah, yeah,
being able to still just focus on playing for a little while and not get bombarded with all the recruiting stuff, I think that's huge. Um,
yeah.
so
Going on. Oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead. So for you,
Um,
what is an ideal timeline for a guy, right? Because of that, right? You can't really talk to any coaches, but do you want to work with guys that maybe are going into their freshman, sophomore year, maybe just to kind of get an idea of what they're looking for and what their, quote unquote benchmarks or dashboard indicator, levels that they need to touch during their freshman and sophomore year?
Yeah, absolutely. I truly believe that freshman and sophomore year, those 2 years are more important than your junior and senior year when you're allowed to talk to coaches. Um, you know, that's when you're getting prepared for the whole recruiting. You're, you know, getting ready for that June 1st date when you are allowed to talk to these coaches. You got to make sure you're doing all the right things leading up to that date, which could be playing in certain tournaments, having a highlight video. The highlight video is, I think, is the most important thing in recruiting.
Oh yeah, it's gold. Throw that
Yeah,
out on X and all it takes is one coach to see that highlight reel and you're getting a call.
exactly. Like you have just one video just blow up. You never know what kind of coaches you're going to get from that, and that's the great thing about social media nowadays is you never know who's out there, and you never know who's going to run into those videos.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And I think Flatground pioneered a lot of that too early on when it was Twitter, now X, right? But they were just like,
Yeah,
hey, like put this out. Here's the format of what you want everything, put your grad year, your GPA, stats and everything all within that one thread. And I was like, dude, yeah, this is free recruiting in a
yeah,
sense, right? Like you just keep posting that out there. And obviously you got your guys, like we kind of mentioned the travel ball circuit, but it does kind of, I think, in a way predict where a lot of guys will, if they continue with that trajectory and keep up with everyone who's going through that from like 15U on up, right? Like if you're on
mhm,
that Dirtbags national versus the American team. You're on the American team, more than likely, you're probably not going to get drafted or recruited by the Power Five school. That's for those
right,
national team guys, right? And maybe not
yeah,
even all those guys. Maybe it's only two or three guys on that national team that get that opportunity, right?
right.
And again, there's some orgs that are very, very stacked and may not necessarily apply all, but I think it's a good way for those guys to reflect and be like, okay, hey, this is where I'm at now, right? Even as that freshman, sophomore, it's like, hey, this is where I'm at, or hey, this is where I'm at on my high school team. I don't start yet as a freshman. It's like, okay, hey, again, same thing. It's not where you start. It's all about where you finish, what work
Yeah.
you're putting into, right? But have some goals for yourself, whether that's, I think the academic ones are huge, but also the metrics for, you know, throwing velocity, exit velo, 60 time, right? Things that those coaches are going to look at. If you
Yeah.
self projecting and getting better, right? You don't want to have your best numbers your freshman year and your sophomore year, you're just as good or maybe no improvement at all, right? Like then that's
Yeah.
kind of a
Yeah.
red flag for a
Yeah.
lot of coaches too, because they're like, oh, this guy's hit his peak. He may not improve much. Maybe you flash it in the junior year, but that might they might pass you up a little bit because you haven't improved in those 2 years, like you mentioned, because you got to continue to, strive and get better and better each year and see that projectability go up versus like
Yeah.
before they were getting those verbal commits 13, 14 new kids and
Yeah.
you know it's tough to come back from. But I've seen a lot of schools in the past pull scholarships from guys that maybe they got injured or they weren't, they thought they were going to be throwing 90 to 95, but they only got to like 88, 90. So they're like, hey, like this isn't, the Johnny Smith that we were expecting.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. I growing up, I was always seeing kids commit to University of Miami,
Mhm.
and I was always
Big,
wondering, like, yeah, how are they getting all these athletes to commit? How are they having all this scholarship money? But then signing day would come, and they'd pull half the kids they committed, which is just such a shame. Those kids went through the whole high school career. They were already committed. They weren't talking with any other schools. And then they get put in a spot where they have no options almost, except maybe go to junior college, which is, really unfortunate. They can't really do that anymore now with this new rule change. So that adds some benefit. But
absolutely.
yeah, I would see it all the time. Kids getting their scholarships pulled and them just have options at that point, which is really a shame.
Yeah. Oh, it is. But I do think that there's a lesson to that from seeing that from other guys' experience, especially in your position. Like, hey, you might have this, hey, this is my number one school that I'm going to go to. And you hear it all the time, like, hey, burn the bridges, no plan B. But
Yeah,
I feel like you kind of need one, not necessarily
yeah,
like, hey, like, don't settle necessarily. Like, if you can get to that number one school you want, by all means, shoot for it, right? Do everything you can to get
absolutely.
there. But, it's kind of like shoot for the moon, land on and hit the stars, right? It's,
Yeah,
it could be essentially that, or maybe it may not be a good fit for the time that you're coming up, right? Like, for your example, like maybe Carson Newman over recruited outfielders your freshman year, as an example, right? Like, and then you're in and you're like, oh, hey, we have like 10 outfielders. I probably should go to a school that maybe just lost a couple guys, or, maybe my freshman year they have one good senior in the outfield spot. So then there's a role to be filled come my
yeah,
sophomore year, right? I think looking at rosters and finding out what opportunities might be coming up or what the schools are looking to have as like needs to be filled, whether you're a middle infielder, pitcher, catcher, right? Like you want to make sure that that team doesn't have like, you know, 4 or 5 catchers just on deck
yeah, yeah,
ready to rock and roll.
yeah, absolutely.
Do you look at that at all as far as for the best fit to kind of see what the roster is or maybe see what they're already looking to recruit and bring on?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I always advise kids, when you're looking at colleges, go to their roster, see who, like, what position, what grade they're in, that, like, you're gonna have athletes, and then you also go to Perfect Game, and you
Hmm.
can see, like, incoming commits for that school as well. Also going off what you're saying, having the backup options. D1 next year they're passing a rule where they're cutting their roster limits to 34, and they're going to be able to offer 34 full scholarships as well. But everyone
Which is
thinks that's,
awesome. I think that's great.
yeah, it is awesome, but then there's going to be so many less opportunities now.
That's true.
Um, I kind of tallied it up. When that rule passes, there's going to be 3,000 Division I athletes looking for a new school, and
Wow. Okay.
yeah,
So
yeah,
versus
they're gonna,
before, just kind of help maybe the listeners don't understand. What was it before? What was the roster size and everything
if,
before?
if I'm not mistaken, I think it was 42 for Division I. You were allowed to travel
42.
42 guys.
You
Um,
traveled 42, but obviously the official roster was 32, I think, right? Or was it
yeah,
30? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
But
But
you can have
all
other
those
guys
kids,
who just kind of be around.
yeah, like stay back or the red shirt and whatever. But, all those guys would be on scholarship. So with this new rule only offering 34 full scholarships, it's like I don't know what I haven't really been talking with much coaches about it, but I don't know if a lot of schools aren't going to be able to afford 34 full scholarships.
Oh, no
Um,
chance. Yeah, those mid-major D1 schools, they're going
yeah,
to be unfortunately kind of flushed out by the big Power Fives as far as the scholarships are concerned. Maybe the
yeah,
NIL will help them, maybe they won't, but I think you just got to get your foot in the door. If you
hmm,
can play at a D1 level, regardless of wherever it's at, you can now switch it up if you want. But
yeah,
not everybody's going to be a paid college athlete.
yeah. Unfortunately,
But no, yeah. So you're saying 3,000 kids are basically cut from,
basic. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
That's a lot of guys.
Yeah, and then they're gonna be looking to go D2 or NAIA, maybe D3, and then
I
all
mean,
those
you can see
kids.
that trickling down to the JUCO level too, right? Like they're like, hey,
Yeah,
like I'm going to go play somewhere. They go here, or
yeah,
the guys who might start at D2, D3, now they have those D1 guys that are riding the bench that are now
yeah,
shifting over. So it's going to be a big trickle down, right? And
yeah,
obviously, just like the COVID years were kind of affecting a lot of incoming freshmen, I think that's going to affect a lot of incoming freshmen too.
yeah. I
Because with
completely
with
agree.
those guys getting those, fifth, sixth year COVID years, there was
Yeah,
guys that were being recruited. They thought they were going to have a spot to fill, like you said, where you were looking at the roster and you're like, oh, hey, guess what? That spot's still not available.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I
It's
think most of
insane.
those have, I think all of those have washed out by now. I don't think anyone has a COVID year left, which is nice.
Uh, I think I have a teammate that I think he's got his last
Oh, so maybe
one.
it's like this one last season that got that.
I think there might be one more, or maybe it's like a medical red. Kids are
Oh,
finding
yeah,
years
you're
any
right.
way they
If
can.
it could be red shirt and then actual COVID year or medical
Yeah,
red shirts blended in
yeah,
there. Yeah, no, it's very true. But all big factors to consider too, right? Like
yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
they're having a bunch of guys that are coming in or they have the medical red shirts. Some kids, and I think there's I found a resource on a previous podcast that I had, and I'll put that here in the show notes for you guys. But there's a resource where you can look and see the retention of colleges. You can see, um, I'm not going to name any specific schools because I don't want to put them on blast, but there was like a certain list. It was like, hey, 50% of our guys on the roster aren't there the following year. I'm like,
Oh wow!
yeah,
So you can
I
see
was kind
that
of
in
like,
depth.
kind of mind blown by that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
To be
that's
like,
crazy.
oh, but there's a reason for that, right? It's like, hey,
Yeah,
like, are these guys, are the coaches initiating more and development, or are they just like bringing in a bunch of dudes and then just playing with what they recruit, right?
yeah,
There could be more to the story. There could be problems in the dugout or like team issues,
right.
things like that. There's more to it than just looking at it and be like, oh, this is a bad school. Like, no, there's a whole lot more to be found out. But if you know that going in and you go to, you know, you're going to maybe look at the school or you're going to a camp and you see some of the players there, you got to ask them questions. Be like, hey,
Yeah,
how long have you been here? Do you like it here? Is there, just little things that maybe you may not see on paper or on
absolutely.
face value, right? I think when you go on those visits, you gotta not just talk to the coach, because if they just keep you in this little bubble and you only talk to the coach, you never
Yeah,
talk to a player, you don't get the full experience of what's going on. And I think it's a big red flag if none of the players come up and talk to you.
yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's there's a lot of false promises nowadays, I
Oh, for sure.
think,
Hmm.
and you definitely got to try and trickle those out as much as you can, and really get to the meat and potatoes of the program.
Absolutely. Oh, and we all know about it too. Like, let's say you get that, you know, Miami, for example, we just kind of mentioned them before. Let's say you get the offer, you actually do sign, you go there your freshman year, but then you realize, hey, in the fall, there's 50 dudes here, 50,
Yeah,
60 guys.
Yeah.
Now there's what, 30 something scholarships available. So that means we're only 34 of us are going to be hanging around.
Yeah.
So it gets pretty cutthroat, and
Yeah.
got to find a way to put yourself at the top part of that list.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so much more professional now. There's with all this money involved, it's a lot of pressure on these kids. I really think, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate. I really think it's unfortunate it's going that way, but it's more about almost like whether they call it clout. It's more about the clout than winning games almost,
Sure.
and it's like college sports. That's what it used to be all about. It's all about just winning, and being able to compete with your boys. And
Oh yeah.
now, unfortunately, it's like, look at me, I got a Dodge Challenger.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. You see that. It's definitely inflated a lot in football, for sure.
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's
yeah.
more,
Football's
it's
the
more, you
worst.
see it more in football than baseball. Like,
Yeah,
the guys who are at Michigan or wherever, like they're getting this card where they can go and swipe it in any restaurant in the town, and, just really astronomical stuff. You're just like, what is going on? These guys are
it's
on another
insane.
planet
Yeah,
versus
it's
us
insane.
eating ramen every other weekend and grinding it out, right?
Yeah,
We have the real college experience.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely,
Oh man, I love it. Well, Sam, I appreciate you taking the time to come on, man. But before I let you
absolutely.
go, how can people get a hold of you? How can they, get started with ASM, and start on their recruiting journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I got a Instagram where you could just DM me. It's called Samuel underscore athlete recruiter. You can just shoot me a DM. I got my Calendly link in there. You can set up a meeting, just a free consultant call, kind of
Mm.
advise you on the whole recruiting process, kind of see where you are as an athlete and everything like that. So those are the two main ways you can get to me, and I'll be more than happy to hopefully answer some of you guys' questions, or we could set up some meetings with you guys.
Love it. Awesome. Well, Sam, again, appreciate you, my man. It was awesome talking with you, getting to
Yeah,
know a little bit more about ASM and all of the recruiting, changes that are going on
yeah,
nowadays.
yeah.
For those of you listening, appreciate it. Stay in the zone.